Good evening, faculty, students, staff, and esteemed guests, particularly our friends in the diplomatic corps. Uh, and welcome to Weatherhead East Asian Institute at 75, celebrating a legacy and looking ahead here at Columbia. So my name is Lien-Hang Nguyen, and I'm the 12th and current director of the Institute, as well as Dorothy Borg, Associate Professor in the History of the United States and East Asia. Tonight we celebrate 75 years of the Weatherhead East Asian Institute at Columbia University. Now, for those of you who can do the math, then we were founded in 1949 in the wake of World War II and the advent of the Cold War, at a time when expertise on contemporary East Asia was urgently needed in the United States. Many of our founding members played a critical role in shaping US diplomatic policy toward the region during and after the war, and recognized the crucial need to understand the cultures, languages, and politics of the countries in Asia. I'm proud to say 75 years in, we're still going strong. Now, Weatherhead began, okay, here we go. Weatherhead began marking the seminal anniversary with a gala in Low Library in February. This is a great photo. Now, if you were there at that event or in any of this year's exciting programming, you'll know that we've held everything from policy discussions, conferences, film screenings, and book talks to alumni events across 7 cities in East and Southeast Asia. I'm just going to repeat that. 7 cities across 5 countries in East and Southeast Asia over the spring, starting in May, all the way to August, the late summer, to commemorate this milestone. Thank you, Wilson. Now, you may be relieved to learn that tonight's discussion brings us to the final event marking our anniversary. While enjoying this year-long celebration, I, for one, am looking forward to our regular event series, which we will continue as before. So again, this is not the final event, it's just the end of our 75th birthday. So it's semi-sweet. And in addition to reflecting back upon our 75 years, this event is also officially to launch a tribute to the Institute's work over the last 7+ decades, and it's through this. The Weatherhead East Asian Institute, 75 years of Northeast, Southeast, and Asia studies. Oh, I'm going to be in such trouble with the staff here. I have no idea. Now, this is a great limited edition 64-page hardcover book that celebrates the people, the milestones, and projects that have shaped our institute since 1949. Now, I'll have more to say about this wonderful coffee table book, at the end of tonight's program. But now let's turn to tonight's program. We will feature a panel discussion with 6 former Weatherhead directors who will all speak with me about the Institute's rich history. Joining me are, and I would just like our directors to just hold up their hands when I call their name. Professor Jerry Curtis. Professor Andy Nathan. Professor Maddie Zelin. Professor Xiaobo Lü. Professor Myron Cohen. Professor Eugenia Lean. So tonight's event offers a special opportunity to reflect on the Institute's legacy, but I also hope that it will energize us in an ongoing commitment to advancing studies of Northeast, Inner, and Southeast Asia in the years ahead. The need for scholarship about East Asia, about the politics, history, culture, language, and arts remains as critical as ever, although obviously in different ways than it did in 1949. It is up to our current and future faculty and students to continue this hard work, supported by our wonderful staff, and they're too numerous to name, but I'm going to try. There's Hida Rashid, there's Wilson Wing, Julie Kwan, Susie Anthony, Lin Shu, Ratna, Ratna B, and Jeff. And of course, our executive leadership, Catherine Forche and Sarah Jessup. Okay, so following the discussion, we invite you to join us for a reception outside in the lobby. It will also be a chance for you to connect with our community, make new connections, and enjoy some light refreshments that we purposely waited. So you have to wait till after you hear us all speak to have a drink and to have some canapes. Now, I would just like to say I had a different order for my colleagues here, for my predecessors, but they're hazing me. So they decided to switch it up a little bit. That's okay. They're keeping me on my toes as the 12th and current director of the Institute. So what I'm going to do, and let me just explain. There is feedback. Okay.
No, we probably don't need it.
Okay. I will use this. All right. Sorry for that. We seem to be having technical difficulties in a lot of our events lately, and that's okay. So what I propose is this is how we're going to do this panel discussion. I have just very few questions, and I'm going to throw the first one out, and I do want them to go down the line, so to speak, and be mindful that we will have 6 of you speaking in this first question. And the second set of questions, I want it to be more of a discussion. So this is when you can cut in, and talk to one another, cut each other off like you usually do, and not be so formal. But for this first one, please be concise. Think of poor Eugenia down there at the very end. So she does have her few minutes of comments, and then we'll have something that's a little bit more free range. We'll just all talk about certain questions I had, and then we'll open it up to the audience for some questions. And then after that, I'll make some closing comments, and then we can go party outside. But the first question, and it's just a simple one, I want each of you to talk about your time as director of this venerable institute. Now, no one goes back, I don't think, to 1949. Andy likes to claim that he is 1871, but that's not true. So we can't go back that far. We will instead start with Jerry Curtis, who basically will and has been at the Institute the longest. You were director of the Institute for a total of 14 years. Yes, you were at 3 different periods, no doubt. So that actually meant he took a break between some of these terms, and he kept coming back. So this began in 1973 and it ended in 1991. What was most exciting to you about these years? Is there anything that you left unfinished that you want to talk about? What was it like being director?
Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. I think this is great. Have a chance to reconnect. When I was a student here, I first was in the Institute as a student in 1963. And so I have a longer history with the Institute than anybody. There are a few people in the audience here who actually go back, I think, almost as far as I do. But I thought I got a kick when I saw everybody come up here. When I was a student here, all the guys wore neckties, not only the faculty, but the students too. And I hate wearing necktie, but I figured tonight this is a special occasion, and I was thinking going back, Andy always wears a necktie, and when I was director, I wore a necktie, so I thought I'd wear a necktie. And everybody on this panel has neckties tonight. And I think, except the women. No, the men have neckties. So that sort of brought back that memory. I want to say, there were a lot of exciting things when I was director. There's a lot of challenging things. After the war, when the Institute was established in 1949, foundations, Ford, Rockefeller, and others, and the government contributed a lot of money. Of course, it's been through a war. Now figure out we have to educate a generation that understands these countries that we were fighting with and countries that we were allied with too, like China. But and so there was money was put in the institute. But in the early 1970s, especially with Japan, the foundations got kind of bored funding Japan, and Japan now is rich; they can take care of themselves. So I had a hell of a time raising money. That was the big job of being director. But more than anything, it was this. What was so special about the institute was it had a real sense of community. The faculty and the students, and there were so many interesting people here. I don't want, and I can I can talk about this for a long time, but I'll make it briefly. All my professors, when I got involved with studying Japan, all the Japan professors here, they had all either been in missionary families before the war, or they got involved in Japan because they were drafted or volunteered to the military and was sent to Japanese language school. So Hugh Borton, first director of the Institute of the East Asian Institute was George Sansom, famous British diplomat. Jim Morley told me once that he took Sansom's course. Sansom would come in, he'd open his notebook, read his speech, close his notebook, and leave the room. Never took a question. It was off. But after he left and Hugh Borton came, Hugh Borton was just a wonderful human being. I mean, Carol, you must have known Hugh. Hugh Borton was wonderful. He was one of the few people who got a PhD before the war in Japan studies at Leiden University, I think. He studied at Todai, went to Leiden, got a PhD, and then went to Washington at the beginning of the war to plan for the post-surrender Japan. And this is like within a month of Pearl Harbor, Americans were planning on what to do after the war was over. And Hugh was one of the leading people who pushed for keeping the emperor on the throne. He played a very critical role, and he was a Quaker, a pacifist, and just a wonderful all-around human being who got really the institute started. So him, and then on the China side, Marty Wilbur, China historian, was director of the institute after Hugh, and then Jim Morley, my mentor and just a wonderful person, Japan politics specialist, Japan history, and then John Lindbeck, who didn't teach, but he ran the institute, and then I became the director when I was still quite young. I was young once, and this sense of community was wonderful. We used to have the East Asian Institute seminar, which everyone had to take. In the seminar, all the faculty members would come into this room, Hugh Borton and Jim Morley and Adolph Barnett, and so on and so forth. And students would report, and then we'd have these leading lights who had real life experience dealing with Japan and with China. So it was exciting. And those of us who were before I was director, most of us came into this field as graduate students not having had much background, if any, dealing with the region. That's a big change from today. We had Hang has the Dorothy Borg chair. Well, Dorothy Borg, when I took my first class on Japanese foreign policy with Jim Morley, Dorothy sat in on it, and so we became very close. Dorothy was the institute therapist. Literally, people would line up outside her office to wait to have their 10 or 15 minutes to share their woes with Dorothy. She was just a special human being. She was never a professor here, but she didn't like to teach. She was a wonderful teacher, but she taught very little. Anyway, so the institute was a community, and it was East Asia in those days was only 3 countries. It was Japan, China, and Korea. That was the extent of it. Now you think about the institute, it goes basically it's the Indo-Pacific region. And it keeps on expanding, and we're big on Southeast Asia. I tried to develop Southeast Asian studies when I was director. We made a little progress, but only now. Thank you. Okay. 1 minute. I still have a minute. That's amazing. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. And when you have, if there are questions and so on, I'd be happy to respond. But I think it's wonderful that this institute has survived and flourished for 75 years, and it keeps on changing and adjusting, changing with the changing times. And God only knows times have changed a lot since I first became director in the early 1970s. So we'll reminisce tonight and answer your questions, and I'll turn it over to Andy.
Now, jumping the queue, because I actually had a little prompt to say this is Andy is considered a young Turk compared to Jerry, and Myron was supposed to go second, but that's okay. I like that you're switching things up. You were director in the early 1990s when there were just major changes taking place in the region, pretty much the end of the Cold War in Asia. I think, though, because you're sitting after Jerry, you're going to talk about time before you were director, and that is okay. I will allow it. After Jerry, so we have our history all wrong in certain places, but that's okay. All right, so that makes you number, then you would be number 7. Number 6, number 7, 5. Math is not our strong suit. Do not worry about that. I'll turn over the floor to Andy. What was it like being director?
Maddie is the reliable source. She has a good memory. I don't. And so Jerry set this stage of talking about not only about the time when you're director. I have a couple of things about that. One is that I started at Columbia in 1971, and that's when this building opened. So the Institute had previously been in beautiful, traditional, high ceiling, big windows, Kent Hall. And when so I came into this building when it opened, which is, and it's true that we all wore ties, and all the other, Jerry and I were both in poli-sci. All the poli-sci professors were these old, can I use the word farts in this community? They were these old farts. They wore ties. They wore, what do you call it, fedoras. They carried briefcases and so on, which I also did the same thing. And I sat around the outside rim of the faculty meetings, and I was very intimidated by all of these old people. So I can sympathize with you when you feel intimidated by me. And I wore my necktie to class and everything until this academic year. And I was the last faculty person on this campus to wear a necktie. But I brought it for tonight because I knew Hang would, I mean, when we had the 75th anniversary event that we showed the photograph of, she said I should wear a tuxedo. And I went into my closet, I found one, and it didn't fit. But anyway, and so and by the way, in contrast to Sir George Sansom, when I started teaching here, I was co-teaching a seminar with Mike Oxenberg. I mean, many of you will know that name, but he passed away at a young age, tragically. But I was co-teaching a course with him. So I went into the men's room to the urinal before the class, and he was standing there writing with a Sharpie on the back of an envelope. I said, "What are you doing?" "I'm preparing class." And we went into the class, and he always had 6 points, as I remember. And he unfurled these 6 points in an extraordinarily impressive manner. I had, spent days preparing for this class. Anyway, when I became director of the Institute, inheriting it from Jerry, the thing was then that Jerry had raised all the money that we had. This was not a time when you raised money from any Chinese sources, and the Institute had money from Japanese sources. And what Jerry had done was to split this money, not to hog it all for Japan studies, but to set up a China Research Committee and a Korea Committee and a Japan Committee, so that this, was very instrumental to the fact that the Institute was a community. And it has always been that. So this is, when one hears about academic politics, in general, it's a dog-eat-dog, backbiting, jealous kind of thing. This has never been true in the Weatherhead East Asian Institute. It's always been you know, a happy community. I sound like an idiot, but it's true. It's been a happy community all the way through the entire time. It's amazing. I want to make a joke and say, even when Maddie succeeded me. No, but I mean, you know, but no, it really was always true. The staff of the Institute has varied in quality. Maddie may or may not want to tell you. Know, we're not going to talk about that. When Margot was the associate director, this was a good time. Some were less. I had one. Now there was a time you may remember when, in order to write a manuscript or a letter of recommendation, it had to be typed. Do you remember a thing called a typewriter? There was a thing. We had a thing called paper, and I had one of my, what we used to call secretary, we don't use that word anymore, when she left the job and we were cleaning out her desk, we found many letters that I thought I had sent, including letters of recommendation. But in the current era, starting, I don't know when, with who came before you? I forget, Eugenia. And, you know, starting sometime after me, we have developed an amazing staff. I mean, the Susie who is intimidating me now with this sign and browbeating me, and the other staff who are sitting back on the window. It's such a pleasure to work with them. So it's been a good time in the Weatherhead East Asian Institute.
So Maddie is next. Maddie was the first woman director of the Institute. She won't talk about having to wear cravats or ties, I hope. And I would love for her to speak at her time when she became director.
About the Institute.
About the Institute.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Institute. I mean, there were a lot of changes when I took over. First of all, we'd never had a woman. We've never had someone who wasn't a political scientist or something like that, a diplomat or something like that. And when I came in, I think it would be fair to say that while we were a very ecumenical community, the emphasis really was on contemporary international relations and that sort of thing. And not during Jerry's time, but in a deeper time, I think there was we had a great community, but there wasn't necessarily a strong sense of community between us and the humanists. And one of the things that I really feel very pleased about is that, I don't think that Andy didn't do it, but I think certainly during the 90s, much of that time having been director, there really was a broadening of the community that was under the umbrella of the East Asian Institute, and many, many more people of ELAC became active in the Institute. Before we were unceremoniously split in half and put back partially in Kent Hall, we had people in literature, we had people in economics, we had people in history, we had many, many different fields together in that space. And that really was something that was extraordinarily precious to me. And I hope that there's some way that we can keep that vital sense of community, even though we have to cross a highway to get to it. So, but there were other things going on at that time too. One of the things that I was thinking about who is sitting up here with me. This was a period when the Institute played a really important role in the university in expanding, I don't want to call it coverage, but really, I guess you can call it coverage, expanding our sense of what the region was and what Columbia's responsibility for the region as an educational, as an outreach and research institution was. Jerry will remember that we did the first, I think it's probably the first big fundraising trip to Southeast Asia. Best time I ever had. It was great with Hugh Patrick and John Bresnan and Jerry and I, and we went to Thailand. We went to Indonesia and then we went to Thailand, and then the Southeast Asian economies decided to collapse. So all our hard work really, what? We were sitting in his dining room, and the finance minister's dining room having dinner, if I remember. And he had his TV on the whole time, which made me think that he would like my father, you know? And they were reporting the crisis that was going on in the banking sector right behind us. So it was really immediately. But the Institute never gave up its real commitment to Southeast Asia. But these years were the years when we actually, besides talking about Korea and having adjuncts who worked on Korea or long-term visiting people, we finally got a professorship in Korean social science. It happened in the 90s. It was also when we began to think of Northeast Asia, even in a broader sense, having our eyes on Inner Asia as part of the economic and political and social intermixing that made up our region. And we were very fortunate to be able to work with colleagues in other departments, as we did for the Korea one as well. In this case with Bob Thurman, and through his very deep connections to the Henry Luce Foundation, we were able to raise an endowment to start our Modern Tibetan Studies program, and indeed endow another chair in Modern Tibetan Studies, which I think it's clearly not only become one of the best modern Tibetan study, perhaps the only modern Tibetan focused study institutions in the country, but probably in the world. And it's, you know, it reminds me of oh my God, I can't do that. I'll stop talking about Tibet, but I will say also that it was also a period when we started to think differently about our student constituencies. We started raising money for fellowships that could allow MA students to go overseas and do field work. We started to think in terms of bringing more undergraduates into our community and helping them in terms of thinking about jobs after school if you studied East Asia, going there, doing language work. We put in a tremendous amount of effort. We've had a Title VI center that the Weatherhead runs since 1964. Title VI centers are the government's programs that support foreign strategic language study in the United States. But during the 90s, we really were able to expand our profile and expand the amount of money we brought in, and were able to bring in many, many more students to Columbia and send more students overseas for language work and so on. So that was really extremely gratifying. And are you going to ask me about the MA program later, or should I say it now? Okay, later. So it was really a great ride. And then of course, at the very end, we had the chance to go through the process of negotiating and garnering the Weatherhead endowment. So yeah, it was good times.
Thank you, Maddie. There's two ambassadors in the audience, so I want them to ensure that the economy of Asia is growing. So we should come back.
Chinese economy during that time.
Then I think this is a good time for maybe Ambassador Mori will say, come to Japan, and Ambassador Zhang to say, come to Vietnam, because the economies are good and maybe we can fundraise for new lines. But speaking of Weatherhead, now I'm going to turn to Xiaobo. You were the director when the Weatherhead family endowed, so that we are now the Weatherhead East Asian Institute and not the East Asian Institute. And if you don't remember any part, I see Carol Gluck in the audience, and she was also very pivotal in this, in the Weatherhead family. But so you had that honor, it was under your directorship. Tell us about what it was like being director at the time.
Thank you very much, Han. Speaking of a Weatherhead, I can only claim that it was under my, I guess, directorship 2002. The name changed, but the endowment actually happened again, as you recognize. I think Carol Gluck and also Maddie both played it, and right.
Students, dog and pony shows for the Weatherheads for 2 years.
Right. It was a great time, also in the sense that so the renaming is very important part of our. I think it's indeed a landmark of the history, 75 years of history of East Asian Institute, now known as the Weatherhead. Remember, at that time, Columbia only have one institute, that is the Harriman, right? But now, after what 20 plus years, maybe the well-known one is it. We named, that was I mean by name. So I think that Maddie said it's a great time. It was also, remember, that's also when Lee Bollinger, the former president, started in 2002, the same year the renaming happened. And when he was inaugurated, the president of Columbia University has set 3 goals. One is a Manhattan Vale, internationalization of education, which is very much part of, impacted our institute. And thirdly is the brain research, the neurological research. I think all 3, he basically fulfilled his promise. But in it, of course, internationalization, globalization is very much part of that. So he's very supportive of our effort. And you can see in the photo that he joined, he really came to the ceremony of renaming and so on. So the renaming is only the beginning of a lot of challenges, because now we have money. I mean, in fact, we do have a money, and how do we spend on that? That's a big challenge. So as Maddie mentioned, that we, in the money is not just for research, but also for a lot of scholarships, student fellowships, and so on. So Institute, indeed, this is the largest endowment that Institute has, and to this day. So I guess when I was a director, I began to have, set up more institutions, within the Institute, different committees. Now we need a fellowship committee, and they still function to this day. We need committees that look at budget and so on and so forth. So we now, I guess, setting up procedures to run this institute, that I thought that was one of my challenges, and I think of an accomplishment. I also want to, besides this renaming and the institute itself, I want to mention something I feel very strongly when I, came to Columbia in 1994. Right, I'm as you might know, I'm a political science professor at Barnard, so I'm the first sort of a non-CU Columbia College faculty serve at the East Asian Institute, which indeed is a Columbia University-wide research institute. And also I'm the first Asian to serve on that. So I had that, indeed, I feel that burden is, if you will, to be that first. But what I was struck since I came, as Andy and Jerry all mentioned, that this is community. I really, from very beginning, the East Asian Institute, I came, I actually got office from very beginning. I was very thankful I got an office, and in this one little corner one is very small, but I started out there in 94. What I noticed, so that's why I kind of enjoy this, I spent a lot of time on this side than my Barnard side. Maybe I should be blamed for that. But anyhow, one thing struck me is that a lot of the a research associate. I want to mention their name because I was very much into the tradition, the continuity of the institutes. I see a lot of former staff here, but I kind of sometimes choking to think about, we have N.T. Wang, who passed away. Now we, memorialize him with a lectureship, a lecture series, and also endowed chair. We have also Robert Immerman, who also passed away. Now we with his donation, he left behind that when he passed away, and then the Professional Fellows Program, now named after Robert Immerman, and we have John president at the time, and I'm also thinking of Samuel Kim. All those research associates, even though they're not on the faculty of Columbia, but they made a lot of contributions in the research and community of Weatherhead East Asian Institute. So let me say that we're celebrating 75th anniversary. So I'm sort of deeply grateful to them and to this, my predecessors and those who are forebearers in this community.
That was amazing. You didn't have Susie have to hold up the 1 minute sign. So
Can I
congratulations. Thank you.
say that I'm not sure what her title is, but we can't leave out Robin Martin because she has done so much for this place. And, a lot of the reason that we're so loved in Washington, well, until now, for our work in the Title VI program is because of the work that Robin has done in developing outreach to levels that never really were imagined in that program. So I don't want to leave her out.
That's definitely true. Asia for Educators and the Freeman Foundation is thanks to Robin. And I think she is starting to work very closely with Sarah Jessup. So we have a nice transition, but this is again reflecting back upon the past 75 years and looking forward to the next 75. So Myron, you came in 1963, but yet they put you almost all the way at the very end here, like you.
Actually, I came in 1959
59. Wow.
as a graduate student. And at that time, the East Asian Institute was on 117th Street, which no longer exists because this building is on top of 117th. And so there was a period in the late night, well, I guess must have been 70, 71, when you'd be teaching a class somewhere on this campus and a huge explosion would occur. And they were building the garage of international affairs and setting off periodic explosions of dynamite to get through the bedrock. Any rate, I want to first of all emphasize again and just reinforce what others have said about the sense of community, which was very, very strong, and it was institutionalized very early. The seminar, the student seminar that Jerry meant, that's how my first experience at Weatherhead, free Weatherhead. My first experience at the East Asian Institute was in that seminar, and there were a lot of connections made between different students in different departments. I just want to emphasize the interdepartmental quality of the institute, and this is helps create an intellectual atmosphere with its own characteristics, rather on top of other opportunities on the campus. So connections were both in terms of different disciplines, but also with respect to the different parts of the world that we covered. And I think that that seminar, I think, was a strong building block for future developments. Now, I think that I believe that it was it was during my time when I was first director, just for 1 year. I believe I was involved in bringing Robin Martin into our program, and so I certainly want to second what Maddie said, and I want to go beyond that because when I became a director my second time, 1908. All the
That's a myth.
2008.
2008. Yes.
But I mean, I've been around for a while. All right. Right. And when I became director in 2008, all this work that's been described had been done. I could, so in a sense, I could sit back, but I didn't sit back because there was another direction that I really wanted to work on, which was to make the Weatherhead Institute far more involved at a university-wide level, going beyond the arts and sciences, bringing in the business school, bringing in the law school, We made professors in those schools members of the executive committee, which hadn't been the case before. And also of course, Barnard, and we tried to bring in a teachers college to the best of our ability. Now, so that was one area. The other area, which I think it's been alluded to in part, but I just want to make the point of the broadening scope of the Institute as a whole. So, for example, working on what my colleagues had already created, we expanded the Institute such that we do not our educational outreach and programming is not cradle to grave, but it's almost cradle to grave. That is to say, we have K through 12. And then of course we work with college students, and then graduate students, and then professional fellows. And it is indeed almost from cradle to grave. Because look, I'm here talking to you. So, and I have the rank. I'm not only professor emeritus. I'm proud to say I'm also a senior scholar, so that Columbia does not let go.
Yeah. What do you have to be a senior scholar at Columbia? Myron, 60, right? 60 years is how you become to get that senior scholar status.
Yes, senior scholar. You have to be retired and have emeritus rank, and this is. But this is retiring in the other sense of the word, to retire. So so at any rate, so the scope of our services and our educational activities, I think, is expands both chronologically, so to speak, but also laterally, involving the university as a whole. And oh, and let me just add, there's one other element here which sort of builds from what I said a moment ago. It was Andy mentioned how he and Mike Oxenberg co-taught a course. I co-taught several courses, but my fondest memory is co-teaching a course with Herbert Paston. And it was an interesting course because his specialty was Japan, mine was China. When that course was given, he was a senior as can be, and I was a junior as can be. And he would walk into class without any notes whatsoever, and begin talking about Japan. And I would walk in with pages and pages, going, what should I say next? You know, and Herb would sort of sit back and smile. But he was great friends with. He was an interesting character because Morton Fried and I were in different ways were connected with the anthropology department. Herb Paston had an MA in anthropology, and he was very close with Margaret Mead, and I often saw them. We had dinner together. Finally, one last cross-cutting relationship bears mention. I'm talking about the weekly poker game. This was vital.
This is pretty bad.
What?
Yeah, because women were not allowed.
You were there.
I asked Hans Bielenstein, can I come and play poker with you guys? Bob Himes was playing poker with you, and he said, no women.
Well, actually,
I see Carol saying that's not true. Carol must have been at one of these poker games that Maddie was not at.
Okay, well, I'm being rescued from this problem right now.
I have to say, one of the treats of the summer alumni tour is that I was able to go to Japan with Jerry, to Taiwan with Myron and Andy, to Beijing and Hong Kong with Xiaobo. I've been to Vietnam with Eugenia. I need to travel with you to Thailand next, Maddie. That is my goal, because these stories come out. I will get you that, but these stories come out. I've heard about these poker games. Number 11. This is my number 11 to number 12. I feel like we're British agents now because everyone has rejected my numbers, but you're number 11, I'm number 12. Number 11, you were director when I came. and was such a great role model. And I saw firsthand where you took the Institute. But please share with us, because we know you were director during the pandemic. So what was that like? Let us know. Can you hear me? Is it on?
So actually, before I get to the pandemic, I want to say, Jerry, you're complaining about ties. I'm complaining about stockings, which I never wear, but for this particular occasion. So I'm there with you in terms of the formality for the Weatherhead, what we have to do. The other thing I want to sort of say is I followed in Myron's footsteps. Actually, it's so nice to see this because I followed in all of these footsteps. And I remember when I took over, I was about 42, right after I got tenure. And it was very, very intimidating because all of my colleagues were my senior colleagues, and they had really sort of big shoulders, right? But that's also where we were able to climb on top of those. And so many of the things that my colleagues have mentioned in terms of community, in terms of the ability of growth, the ability of the Institute to evolve, the ability of the Institute to kind of have a vision in multiple directions, whether it's moving beyond kind of the traditional kind of more policy orientation to include the humanities. I see all the ELAC people here, right? Or whether it's to move into the university, to reach out to social work. I see Qingao here, to law, and we, under us, I know that Gray worked with people at Lamont, right? I mean, this real vision that I think has made Weatherhead a leading institute on campus, a real model. And that's what I hear all the time now in the provost office, that the Weatherhead is cited as a real model. And the other thing that has also started much earlier, right? Jerry building from China, Japan to Korea, but then from there we went to Tibet and Taiwanese studies and Southeast Asian studies. I think also along the way, in addition to evolving in terms of our geographical coverage, we also evolved in terms of how we understand a region. And so even while we still maintain the coverage that's been built over the year, we understand region differently. It's a fluid, vibrant, historical, evolving one that is sometimes tied to each other. Sometimes it's very transnational, very global in scope. And that has actually been really exciting. So it's not just actual coverage, but how we approach things. And then the last thing I want to mention too about what I've really sort of benefited from in terms of inheriting this legacy about what makes a good institute is kind of thinking in terms of discipline. So expanding disciplines, but thinking about what we as an institute can do. So it's K through 12, it's outreach. One thing I am quite happy about under my tenureship, we have, I'm looking at Tony right now, we expanded, we created something called Asia in Action, where we very much sought to bring artists, activists, people who have more of a tie in the outside world, but yet is very deeply committed to Asia, Southeast Asia in different ways. So for Tony, it's through film, right? And connecting film as an intellectual endeavor to film as a practice, right? Asia in Action, I think, it's just yet another example of how we continue to expand the Institute's footprint, right? And what we can do, the extraordinary fundraising. I mean, this is where Hang has just taken off. She is just fundraiser galore. I did a little bit, including a Southeast Asia trip where we went to Indonesia. I think Andy and Xiaobo and I went, right? And then we had a whole wonderful group. We went to Indonesia, we went to Singapore, and so on and so forth. But Hang has only sort of ran with that really to kind of increase our profile. And that's important because it increases our profile in the region. So I think but we had challenges too, right? The one challenge was definitely the pandemic. And the pandemic was, I think, the start of a shift that I think unfortunately kind of continues today, in the sense that, the pandemic forced the world to close down, right? It forced the university closed down. It forced us to kind of turn inwards. But we're still kind of recovering from that geopolitically. And some of our ties with Asia are not as robust as it had been in the past. So, traveling literally to China now is more difficult and more challenging. And that's just one example, right? So I'm kind of really looking forward to the ongoing evolution where we can return to a more global and a more open world, because I think actually that's when we thrive, right? And we thrive both as scholars who go there and also our students, right? We get fabulous students who come from Asia. And and alas, some of these challenges I don't think are going to go away anytime soon. I think that's the more difficult thing. And Susie is giving me the 1-minute reminder. As usual, this is again, we have an exemplary staff. We always have. So I think I'm going to keep it short because we've been going on for a while and I'd rather have a discussion.
Torn. I have so many questions, but I do want to open it up to the audience. But I'm going to play one little game because I'm thinking of Maddie. I do want you, and I know you were talking about Marcy, and I hope you answer in this way. I want you each to say your crowning achievement as director and your biggest failure, but only one word, okay? Or maybe a description. That's it, because this is lightning round, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. All right. So, or start in the middle, maybe whoever would like. So, but use your mic. Crowning achievement, biggest failure.
Unfinished business. I thought the Weatherhead was great. I think we need to do more.
Aren't you going to talk about Marcy then?
Well, that would be two.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, just very quickly, I mean, one of the things that was interesting is that around the time that I was director, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not there was such a thing or even need for quote unquote Asian studies, regional studies. I don't know what you want to, I mean, I forgot the words that they used to describe it so that we wouldn't do it. And we felt, I think we really stood firm and we're convinced that no matter what you were doing, if it had something to do with Asia, you better know a lot about the place. You can't just, be a pundit and read Henry Kissinger and then think you know everything about China. No. So we used to have an institute certificate, which was just internal, where PhD students in different departments who wanted to deepen their knowledge of East Asia would do a certificate on China or on Japan, but they'd also have to do work on the other place and so on and so forth, and they'd have to do history. But fewer and fewer people were doing that. And SIPA was moving away from having regional specializations. So Mark von Hagen, who was the director, who's also passed away, unfortunately, who was the director of the Harriman, and I got together and we proposed, I think, the first MAO, which I feel a little embarrassed about. But anyway, I think ours had a real substance to it, to provide a master's degree for people who would not necessarily be going off to get PhDs. Many of the people we targeted initially were embassy people, for example, people from Indonesia who had not been able to really understand China because of the constraints of their politics, or people who were going into film and were, wanted to know more about China because it was becoming a major place for innovation in film and so on. And so we took the requirements from the certificate and tweaked it a bit and made it into a master's program, which is now thriving. And I think it's a mainstay of the work that we do here at the Institute. And it also brings the faculty together as well. So there we go.
Letting her do this because that crowning achievement needed to be unpacked and explained a little bit. But for the rest of you, more concise.
Just want to follow up what Maddie said about Marcy, because I am serious, because this is part of that. Yeah, I think that's one, Maddie started, I can say I continued it, and I still the faculty director of that program. So almost 30 years when you started in 1990. I'm very proud of it because I think Maddie said that currently there are a lot of challenges about studying, especially regional studies to the SIPA students and so on. It is indeed a challenge, but then some recent cases reminds me how much we have done. I think I heard that I wasn't at the conference, the Japan conference, the ambassador from Korea, Pa Chung-hee, I heard the name. He actually was, I remember him. He was one of SIPA student or PhD student, but also got certificate from this early 2000s, late 1990s. And then also reminded another person I recently read about, in the news yesterday, is the current ambassador to China, Peter Tan from Singapore. Actually, he was an ambassador to Japan, and before that, he was ambassador to Korea. I thought that was a case. What a case! Singaporean Peter Tan, class of 2000, one of the early of Marcy. So that's one of the cases. I think it's a really illustrate how much we have done. I think we should really congratulate ourselves on that.
So in 1980, I got an introduction to then the president of Toyota Motor Sales Company. This is before the company merged into what you know today as Toyota. There was the manufacturing company down in Toyota City, and motor sales, Toyota Motor Sales, right across the street from the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo. And Toyota Shoichiro was the president of Toyota Motor Sales. And so I got to meet him, and I was trying to raise money. I told him about the institute and so on, and finally said, "Okay, we can." I forget, it was relatively small amount of money, but a kind of a soft money gift, an annual gift. I was so excited. I said, if you do that, I'd be very happy to take a group, a few of my colleagues from Columbia down to Toyota City during the summer and give you kind of a briefing on how we see what's going on in the United States. Because I knew they were thinking about, this is already the Japan bashing has begun, and they're thinking about should they invest in the US. So for then, I think it was close to 10 years, every summer, I would take 4 or 5 people to Toyota City. Carol went with me, Herb Passon went with me. A lot of guys I took, Bob Mundell and a number of other people from the economics department, Hugh Patrick, and so on. It was great. And so that initial gift from Toyota ended up being given to us every year now for over 40 years. It's just unbelievable. So I created this Toyota research program, and it's a substantial amount over the years. It's reached $7-8 million probably, maybe even a little bit more. And then about 2 years ago, by the way, Toyota Shuichiro, I've met many interesting and impressive people in Japan. I would say not only in Japan. I think Toyota Shuichiro is probably one of the most impressive, wonderful people I've met. He's, president of the world's greatest automobile company, was the head of it, and as modest as a day is long. He always liked to say, it's good for Toyota to be number 2. Otherwise, we'll get too full of ourselves if we're number 1. But I know he always wanted to be number 1. But he was very modest, and he'd love to talk about all kinds of issues. Anyway, we had the Toyota research program 2 years ago. The head of the company said to me, "Oh, I don't know what to. But then, after getting that grant, a few years later, Jim Nakamura, who taught economics here, retired, and the economics department wasn't going to replace him with a Japan specialist unless we had the money. So I went to Shoichiro. This is when, this is before all these, corporate governance reforms have made life more difficult. I met with him and I said, we need an economist, Japan economist, but for that, we got to have the money. He says, how much do you need? I said, it was $3 million in those days. He said to me, I'll never forget, he said, if you tell me that what you want is $3 million for a chair in the economics department, I'll do it. And he did it. So that's what David Weinstein's chair is. And so I said, wow, that's so wonderful. We have to name the chair. Should we use your uncle's name, your father's name, they're all Toyotas. He said, if you put Toyota in the name of the gift, people will think that this professor is somehow working, has a relationship with us. We don't, this is not about Toyota selling cars. This is about strengthening US-Japan relations. Come up with a different name. So I came up with the name of Xiaobo, who was the occupation guy who handled the financial reform. Anyway, so 2 years ago, Toyota said to me, why don't you change take Toyota? I had this Toyota research program. Take Toyota out of the name and try to raise money from other companies. But they continue to and continue to the present day to support us, and now it's going to be up to Hang to somehow sustain that relationship. So I think that was wonderful. That's one of my favorite achievement, favorite sense of having done something really important for the institute, and we have had a real long run from 1980 until the present day. That doesn't happen anymore. And those kinds of people like Shoichiro Toyota, who saw the big picture and understood that you had to have a good overall relationship in order to have a good business environment. That's very special. My failure, what I was most frustrated about, which is why I'm happy to see what's going on now. What I was most frustrated about, we couldn't really succeed in doing much in Southeast Asia. We tried a little bit. We had a great trip. Maddie, you'll remember no, I was going to say, and in Thailand, but I remember at Thailand, I once was going to be a jazz pianist. You remember this? And so we went to some club for dinner, and they had a jazz singer. And so I went up and sat in, and we had a session.
The piece in one key, she says, I have to sing in this other key, and Jerry just instantaneously transposed. I was so impressed.
So that was my other achievement.
Okay, who's next?
That's not bad, Jerry, but I believe that it was under my directorship that we had the carpets changed on the 9th.
I just want to say we are actually, after a trip to Taiwan, a lot of Andy's students are putting together an Andrew J. Nathan speaker series. So this is a huge testament to his teaching, his mentorship. He's just too humble to mention that.
Too humble.
So we'll stick with the carpets. The carpets were a good deal.
Who are you calling?
Myron or Eugenia,
oh, right.
yes.
So I just want to mention one thing that I didn't mention earlier. One of the achievements was to really penetrate into undergraduate education. And this is an interesting story behind this. We had some meetings at the Institute, and we planned to launch a program whereby summer session seminars would be held for undergraduates in China. And we were talking about it. That's when I was director. And one day I'm walking on the campus. Now you may recall that our previous president, Lee Bollinger, liked to jog. He would be running every morning, around noon, he'd run to Central Park and back again. And one day I'm on the campus, he was just coming back, jogging. And I said, Lee, and he pulled to a stop, panting. And I told him what we're doing. And he got very excited. And he said, oh, let's have a meeting on this. And you were about to become director, and you joined that meeting. You may remember that. And so we met, and the program was launched. And the program was launched. And I think that really that was one thing that I was very.
What the program is?
Oh well, the program is that you take a course. The students take a course before going, and it's a seminar format, and they have to it's a I've not participated in the actual in the actual tour, but it's a scheduled activity in China, and then they upon return they write up their experiences and get academic credit for it.
But it's not just China, it's Global Scholars Program. Yeah.
Now it's become the
Yeah,
Global
right.
Scholars Program. I'm talking about its inception was was China, then East Asia, now global. But it originated at the East Asian at the Weatherhead Institute. So now as far as my regrets are concerned, I share when I was director, the positive thing is that the Southeast Asian component of our program became much more accepted. It became institutionalized, and we had visiting scholars in doing this. It helped to redefine the academic culture of the institute. That was good, but what wasn't good was we could not at that point succeed in making it totally permanent. And so that was, I think, my disappointment. My disappointment, especially on top of the fact that intellectually and academically, it was vigorous and powerful. So that was and that I say is my one of the regrets that I have.
So I can claim credit for that in the sense that I was able to, again, to build on the efforts before, and we now have an amazing Southeast Asian, small but burgeoning Southeast Asian program. In addition to Hang as our director, we have John Phan, who is also a very active Vietnamese humanities, a very active Weatherhead member in ELAC as well. So that was actually something I was very happy about that I could participate in. Another thing that I will say in general, this is a little bit more abstract. I felt like I brought a bit of a generation shift. So in the sense that I moved our institute. Xiaobo was my generation. Yeah. 40 years between the two of us. No, but in the sense that, we are indebted to all of you, but at the same time, there's a need to kind of move forward. And I really worked hard to ensure that the younger generation felt like they could participate. So I did a lot of very modest things to do that, from stipends to book workshops to just ensuring that they had access to programming and so on and so forth. But I think that really shifted the culture of the Institute for the better. And we continue to grow. I see Dominique in the back. I see Ruth. I mean, really, new blood makes this place vital, right? And postdocs too. I think we really sort of have grown the postdoc community as well, and they help as all of us get aged and unable and burdened with administration. We really rely on some of the young blood to help with the teaching and so on. And then failures include, let's see, I'm trying to think, saying yes to the provost office, so I could not continue. Actually, that might be a success because Hang took over. And then, one thing I actually really regretted, and this is not necessarily a failure, but I was planning a shooting exhibit in Low Library right before the pandemic hit. So that's a regret.
Can I just add one thing? It's both a success and failure. I'm now recall. I think the success is that both relate to China studies. Is the we tried during my years as director. I think when NT passed away, we sort of tried to endow a chair, and that needed a lot of work because it wasn't quite enough. The family left part of money, about 50%. We eventually asked Lee Bollinger. Again, this is Lee Bollinger really has done quite a bit, I have to say, on this expansion of or supporting Weatherhead and our initiative. So that's a success, took some time. But then there's also the failure. If you talk of failure, we actually attempt to set up a China Center. Contemporary China Studies Center. I mean, a lot of us involved, and we even have that. We even tried to make some offer to certain positions, and then it didn't quite come out. Well, not yet. Okay.
That's a good point to pick. Not yet. So one of the things why I'm glad that we ended with this, we need your support. We still have so many initiatives that we would like to undertake and see come into fruition. That was a great note to end on and for that reason. And I will try to prove, someone needs to try to prove Jerry wrong, that in that fundraising landscape, there is someone who resembles your guardian angel in Japan to donate and to give like you were able to with the Toyota research program and so on and so forth. I am going to open it up now. We don't have that much time. I'm sorry for monopolizing the questions, but we can take. And of course, we have a reception, so do not worry if you don't get your question answered, but we'll take any questions. Oh, you don't? Oh, great.
Question to everybody about today. And by the way, I'm Frank Kale and an alum. I got my PhD in 81. And that's enough about that. We can expect in the days and months to come a great deal of, what's the word? Let's use friction for the moment, but it's worse than that, in the relationship with China and with the incoming president. And there will be a lot of confusion, I'm guessing, in the public at large and in the Columbia community at large. So what do each of you think at this point, before those events are crashing upon us, the East Asian Institute, the Weatherhead East Asian Institute, can do to arm the faculty and the students who will be coming in to handle that?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Yes, I will have to answer this because I am director. That was a good point, Maddie, but I might need to tap on my predecessors. One of the bright spots, if there is any bright spot in terms of looking to the next 4 years and beyond, is that Asia, working as an Asia scholar, is much more, is one of these regions where we can work towards combating a lot of what I think will happen in the next 4 years. And here, one of the examples I'll just say is something like fundraising. Going this summer to Asia and reconnecting with our community, seeing students want to come to Columbia from the region was something that was really the reason why we undertook these summer alumni Asia tours, is to reconnect with our community. And it was a bright spot. It continues to be one. I was in Asia during the election, and it was a saving grace to be there. So I feel like there is one way in which, my colleagues on the stage, one of the things that we can take solace in is that we work on a region that is just, it's growing, it's booming, it's becoming more and more important. For how I do it, just me in terms of as the director and the faculty member of Weatherhead East Asian Institute, is I engage with Vietnam. So how is Vietnam going to navigate the next 4 years and another what looks like trade war 2.0? So for me as a scholar, and I'm looking right here at the ambassador, and our friends in the diplomatic corps, is that and again, I guess I haven't been able to do this a little bit about myself. I was a war refugee, so came from Vietnam at the end of the Vietnamese War in 1975. And I never thought I could work in this space that I do, working as a historian of the Vietnam War, but actually working towards US-Vietnam reconciliation. So this is something that I'm trying to impart to Columbia, to my students, that individuals can make a change. And for me, it is working basically towards world peace, as someone who was a direct victim of a war in the past century. That is something that I can bring my scholarship to bear. I can bring my current, role as someone who is involved in U.S.-Vietnam reconciliation. I think it's more necessary than ever, given what we're facing. Great. You're going to end with this last question. And again, we can take this out to the reception too, because they're,
I was just going to ask, what's next?
I was
New
gonna say
direction.
very quickly. I mean, there are several things that we do. It's always a tense time, and I think there's several things that we continue to do. I remember Carol once making a pitch to Lee Bollinger, talking about how it's really important for us to be a place where real knowledge is situated, to continue to try and make ourselves a place where people will go to find out what's really going on, especially in the kind of media environment that we have now. But I also think there are going to be hard times. I mean, I wonder whether Title VI will last, for example, which I won't say how much it brings in, but it brings in a lot of money to Columbia every year to redistribute back to students. And I think one of the things that we can be really thankful for across the board is the degree to which we have at least been able to cushion ourselves with an endowment that will persist unless, the whole economy crashes, which I worry about as someone who will retire soon. But nevertheless, I don't think it will. And therefore we will be able to go on to do what we need to do and pick ourselves up afterwards. But it does point to why perpetual money, perpetual wealth that can support these kinds of institutions is extremely important, because we can't always rely on the year-to-year gift.
Hi. I just want to make 3 comments, if I may, because I've also been here forever and am retiring. But first of all, I think everyone in the audience should know that these people sitting in front of us have given so much of their lives to make the Institute what it is. I think every one of them, and now Hong's in this position, had small children when they were doing what they were doing. Jerry, I remember when you came back in 1980 or whenever with the Toyota money, we had a big party downtown at a restaurant, everyone, staff, faculty, everyone, to celebrate. And you had 2 children under 2, I think. It was quite amazing. And we had more than the baseball game. We used to have a baseball game with ELAC at the end of the year. The other thing I'd say in answer to, Frank's question is, if anyone now here of the younger generation teaching can co-teach with the historians who teach American history, where we need to be is not, in order to protect our colleagues too, when hostility grows, as it will and did during COVID. It's not just the Asian American contribution to American history. It is America's interest in East Asia and other parts since the Clipper, what was it called? The China Clipper sailed right after that is not in American history. And working with general college and high school teachers who are not Asian specialists, we've conquered world history. We've got ourselves in, and it's beautiful where we are in the curriculum. It's perfect. We're nowhere in American history, and that's our next challenge before I completely retire. But I hope on campus there was a lot of co-teaching, as you mentioned, across departments at one point, between literature, comparing the Tale of Genji with I don't know what in literature, and it brings in Carol's push always to what was it called, Carol? Expanding East Asian studies by getting into general education courses in the other departments where our colleagues don't know the content. We know the content. A lot of you know what the trade with China. Who knows was so important? Who knows what China was like to the US before 1800? Really important. Thank you all. for the institute you've built.
Staff, I have to, questions will not end. They'll just move to the reception. But before we do that, I just want to remind everyone that if you want to, I'm giving this out to our directors, but there's, we will keep it for you, but if you want to take a look at it, there are some copies out there. We also have, in addition to the book displays, a selection of historical photos and excerpts in our lobby. Please take a look at them. In particular, there's one of Dorothy Borg that I would love for you to look at. They are available to supporters of the Institute. If you'd like a copy, please email us. We have our email address, weai@columbia.edu. There's also a downloadable PDF on our website and the QR code right behind Jerry there. But we thank you for coming today, and mainly the party's not over. Now we'll let you eat the food and have some wine or anything else that you would like to drink out in our lobby. But thank you so much. This ends the formal portion of our event, but again, party continues.